Hello and welcome to part 2 of this interview with Emily Long. If you haven't seen part 1 to this interview, and then click the first link in the description below and watch that before you watch this one, otherwise you won't know what Emily is talking about. But in this video, Emily speaks about the importance of community, why it's important to say no, and also just what she's learned through her mental health experiences. Because I think she's an incredible individual with one hell of a story, so I hope you find it just as interesting as I did. Hope you enjoy this conversation with Emily Long. You also mention in the incredible article that you've written, and I honestly I've probably read it like a million times by now, about the missing piece in your puzzle was community, and the fact that when you found a community that really helped you, and that was one of the biggest changes that you'd made. And it's really interesting because I had an interview with Andy McLean yesterday, and he said the exact same thing. Why did community have such a big impact on you, and what did your community look like?
So, one of the really key things that I think is fairly consistent across different mental health problems is that really often they come with like this urge to isolate yourself, and that could be for a million different reasons. And when you're at your worst, it's almost impossible to not listen to that. Mm-hmm. So there's the urge to isolate yourself, and then there's also the pressure that you face if you actually resist that, and if you do start speaking about it. And so things like mental health stigma, things like what my GP said to me about not thinking that I would be able to deal with being in Oxford, yeah. That pushes you out of society in a lot of ways. You know, if I don't think that I'll be able to fit in or keep up with the academic community, then instantly I'm not going to feel like a part of that community. And sort of to then change that is obviously very difficult. The main thing is sort of reaching out to people that you already know that they like you. Like, 100%. You know, there are people, you had friends before, and if they are worth the time that you put into them in the first place, they'll be willing to pick you back up now. 100%. So, and it's putting yourself out there on your own terms as well, because often, you know, say you get to a space where people are inviting you out to do things, but you don't feel able to, so you keep turning them down, and you keep turning them down until they stop asking, because they don't see that as like a bad thing. It's not that they don't want you there, but what's the point in asking someone that isn't going to come? And you get to a point where it has to be you who makes the first move, which is something that I think we can change in general. I think if people realise that this is what's happening, that, you know, by stopping inviting someone out, they are sending a signal to that person that they don't mean to send. Yeah. Then actually, chances are, you know, hopefully we'll get to a point where people are like, okay, like, my friend's been isolating themselves a lot, I can reach out and I can do that, because that's always going to be well received, even if it's not even replied to. I think there's something in having time for yourself every single week. Mm. It could be an afternoon, it could be a day. Block that out and protect that time like the most important thing in the world is going to happen in that time, because you need that time to recharge. You need the time to reflect and be by yourself, and not be by yourself, but do anything you want for yourself. Mm. But I feel like we need to be okay to say no to things and to put ourselves first, that we don't do a lot of the time. Definitely, and you know, too often we make excuses for these kinds of things as well. But we have to give ourselves justification. Yeah. It's like, if you ask me to meet you and I say no, I have to extend that with a but. No, or because. No, because I'm doing this, and this, and this. Imagine if you asked me to go out or do something, and I just said, no, I'm looking after my well-being today. Mm. You'd be like, what's wrong with you? Like, are you crazy? Like, that's mental. We shouldn't do that. I wish I could send someone that message and literally get like an emoji clap back. Well done, you're amazing for looking after yourself first. Yeah. Because I feel like we just don't do that. We don't put ourselves first. We live on other people's timetables a lot of the time. Definitely. And people see that as selfish. Yeah. Whereas it's not selfish. That's looking after yourself.
There's a big difference. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And it's about, like, we really need to normalise that. We really need to normalise mental health as, you know, not just existing in illness, you know, like, you can be perfectly, like, well and not have any, like, symptoms of anything and just be having a bad day. Like, that's completely fine, that's completely normal, but that is mental health. That's not,
I agree.
You know, well-being and mental health are very much one and the same thing. They don't only exist when something's wrong. And I don't think there's that sort of normal discussion of it in the same way. It's like, oh no, I can't come out today, like, I have a really bad cold, or like, I have the flu, or etc. Like I said, you know, we're getting to this point where we're talking more, especially about anxiety and depression, which is fantastic, but it feels a lot of the time like when you talk about mental health, you have to be making a statement. Talking about it is a social point to be being made. It is a, you know, this desire to change society, and it is in a lot of ways, but equally, like, I just want to be able to tell you that, like, I don't feel great today. Like, that's not me making a point, that's not me trying to invite any kind of intrusion into my life because of that either. It's just a normal conversation that needs to be normalised.
I just want to be comfortable in sharing how I feel.
Yeah, exactly.
And that isn't a thing. Like, we don't, even when you meet with your friends, it's not often you speak about how you're feeling about things. And I think we still have this view of emotion as like a weakness. I feel like, because I think the term resilience gets thrown quite a lot recently as well. It's like, oh, you're resilient, you can go through things. And also they're saying, like, be strong. And that's a sign of strength. It's a sign of you can accomplish things, you don't let things get to you. When actually, I think that can be really detrimental, because resilience could also be masked by not accepting how you're truly feeling and putting things off and presenting yourself in a way that you want other people to see you.
Yeah.
And then I think that can be quite dangerous. There's a question that I want to ask you. What have you learned through all this? Because I literally, from the first moment I met you, I was like, Emily, you're amazing. I don't quite know how you've achieved everything you have done, because you've went through these incredibly difficult times when you were 15, so pretty much at the start of your academic career. You've been on this journey that's had its ups and its downs, but at the end of it, you've still managed to get into one of the best universities in the UK. You've not just survived, you've thrived. You've done incredibly well for yourself. And that, for me, I was like, how did you do that? Because, like, for me, I just put academics completely on the back burner, and this wasn't even a thing. So because there's going to be young people who watch this who might be going through challenging times for GCSEs or A-levels or even university. So what have you learned from going through your studies whilst having what you had going on?
I guess, like, the one thing I kind of wish is that that I would have been able to feel like I could go through all of those things without having to be, like, this perfect person, without having to, you know, like...
No one's perfect.
Exactly, of course. And so for example, like, you know, academics was very much my thing. I'm really glad that I did well there. But I was also, you know, I was desperate to just be, like, the model student, you know, to push myself to get stuff done, even if that was really detrimental to my own health. Like, I wouldn't have told a teacher, you know, I'm really struggling, like, is there any chance I could have an extension? And I know, in my heart of hearts, that because generally, you know, I always was, you know, they knew I was always trying my best, and they knew that I was able to pick things back up if I dropped them off for a little while. If I'd asked them that, they probably would have given it to me, and they would have understood, and they would have tried to help. And I was so caught up in making sure that nobody thought that there was anything bad about me or that anything was wrong, that you end up powering through. And as much as
it's interesting how you thought it was bad at the time. I find that interesting. And,
you know, there were definitely days where, like, you know, I did take days off school because I physically could not go in. And I was sort of terrified at the idea of someone, like, thinking that
Or finding you
I was skiving or thinking that there was something wrong. And I mean, like, I remember really clearly there was one day that I didn't go in. It'd been like a really intense week, like there'd obviously been loads of work on, but there's loads of extracurricular stuff going on that I'd done, and I was talking to my friend that evening, and she was like, oh, you know, our English teacher asked where you were today. And I turned to her and I was like, oh, I think she's probably like catching up on sleep. And when I got that message, my heart dropped, because I was like, there's no way, like, that's a valid reason for me to miss school. There is no way that... And the teacher's response was, she was like, Emily, actually understanding that sleep's important, like, finally. And she had this, like, she made a joke out of it.
Sounds like one hell of a good teacher.
Amazing teacher. And she made a joke out of it. She, you know, she made it lighthearted, but she understood. And it, you know, that was a big moment in actually being like, yeah, you know, I did make the right decision taking a day to, like, look after myself. And if I just accepted that teachers and people would have been like that, and accepted that I didn't have to be a perfect student, that I probably could have done what I did without as much suffering being a part of it.
Emily, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. And like, and one of the best things about speaking at groundwork, I think, was meeting you and hearing your story. And you know how much I rave about you, and you're going to Oxford in September. I know you're going to be amazing. Just keep doing what you're doing. I'm looking forward to seeing whatever you do next. And take a compliment. There you go,
Thank you.
And that was my conversation with Emily Long. I hope you found it valuable, and I would actually really appreciate it if you could let me know in the comments what the one thing you gained from this video was. I'll read through them all and I'll just find it really interesting. Because the thing that I gained from the second part of this interview was that it's okay not to be perfect, and to not set ridiculously high standards for ourselves which are really hard to meet. And that it's okay to be honest with teachers, friends, family about how you're feeling, and that it's also okay to say that you're struggling also. And so I want to thank Emily for sharing that, and for also being so open and honest about her experiences. My next video is, well, not my next video, but my next interview will be with Sarah Cusack. And Sarah is just an incredible human being who I actually met in Malaysia and Borneo when I went overseas on a 10-week expedition with Rally International. And we speak a lot about grief in that interview and how to overcome grief. So I think you'll find that video really interesting. And if you want to be notified for when that video comes out, and then please subscribe. Obviously, I'd really appreciate it. Only on 21 at the moment, getting there slowly but surely. But yeah, please subscribe, and I shall see you at the next interview.